that's exactly what this was designed for, is so that fans can come in and they can look through a whole talent directory. So if you think of when you log into Netflix or something, what if you had like all the actors and people on there, and then you're like, oh, what is this person in? And you see all their movies or whatever. Well, on Plauzzable, you can look through the talent, or you can go to the all shows listing, because everything's in real time live. So it's kind of like appointment TV, or like the TV guide.
Oh, cool.
You have to be at a certain time, you know? And some people were like, Leanne, why would I be at a certain time? I go, if you were to go to a club, you just don't show up whenever you want and expect a performance. You go at a real time.
Yeah.
Yo, hey, what we gon' slap today? Yo, hey, what we gon' slap today?
All right.
What it do?
What it do? The world may not need another podcast, but it definitely can use a slap.
A slap right in its face.
That's right. Welcome to Slap the Power. How you doing, Maya? It's good to see you.
I'm wonderful. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm great. On the show today, we're going to focus on, I love empowerment. I love the empowerment story, but I especially love female empowerment. And on the show today, we're kind of focusing on something that's sort of near and dear to me now, which is, you know, post-pandemic and everything. We had to, as soon as the pandemic hit, we had to stop touring and instantly go into an online world. And it seems like we haven't come out of this online world. It's a streaming world that we are kind of now in. And whether we're musicians or comedians, it interests me on how our world has changed now that we exist in a streaming world. And so I'm looking forward to it. We have a guest on today, Leanne Linsky, who will be coming up a little bit later. And she actually built a whole platform around helping streaming and comedians and to take control of their own content. And so I'm looking forward to talking with her a little bit later. But what I'm really interested in right now is, how was your weekend? Tell me.
You know, my weekend was good.
Where were you?
I was in Vegas with Billy Idol, which was cool. And then I was at Delilah's on Sunday, the Vegas one, and that was really cool. I hadn't been there in a while, so it was fun to sing in it. It's a bigger room at the one out here. But I think that you...
here's bigger, or Vegas is bigger?
Vegas is bigger. It's almost twice the size.
Delilah's.
But what I did notice, just based on those experiences, was... okay, we're definitely in a scenario in which the world is still grappling with how we treat artists and how we treat workers. Because in the midst of being in Vegas, there were 4 strikes. And I don't know that people recognize that there have been 312 strikes just in the last year.
Jesus.
People are fed up. And I think that Leanne's story is something that really illustrates something that not only happened because of COVID, but happened pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Because people were finding that it was hard to play at venues. They had to pay to play almost everywhere they were. They were being paid very poorly. And at a lot of these venues, even today as a musician, you're still looking at $100 to $150 per person to play for 3.5 and 4 hours. So the wait staff is making more in tips than you are, but you had to go to school to do this profession. And no disrespect to the wait staff. I mean, they're working hard too, but it just doesn't feel comparable or fair. And I'm noticing that in almost every aspect of workers of some kind, whether it be musicians, actors, writers, the people who are creating the thing are being paid the least.
Yeah.
The people who are doing the labor are being paid the least, and it's not working.
No.
So I think that this episode is really timely because it's showing what can be done, but it also shows how you have to change the attitudes of people because people don't want to do something new.
And I think it's interesting because overnight, you know, when 95% of our income pre-COVID came from live music, overnight, instantly, that was all gone. And it it didn't even and it didn't come back the same way either, just because of the nature of technology.
But even the fact that 95% of your income came from live performance is skewed. That
Yeah.
shouldn't be the case.
It should not be
and
the case,
just and I think that what you're seeing is a reclamation of, we got to make income somehow, and if you're going to take it away from us every other place, we have to design a new place.
Yeah.
And the thing that I'm worried about now is, I remember this happened when you first had LimeWire and Pandora, is that, at first it was this unregulated market that took so much away from the record industries, they made it punitive for artists.
Yeah.
Because that's really what we're looking at here, is a field in which, because streaming platforms were basically giving things away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But they were doing it on the backs of artists that they never consulted or let in on the thing, right? So now in this new podcast channel, make your own channel, the rules are different because people got hip, but it's still the wild, wild west. So
Yeah.
it's still this arena of, how does one make money and who gets to the seat at the table?
Yeah.
Because what I learned from Leanne, and especially in just listening to her story, is that she was able to create this pathway because she wanted to be ethical about it. But what if the person who had gotten to that same seat at the table was like, I just want to make another thing where I get 98% of the money.
Yeah.
And instead of you getting 3%, I'm going to give you 5%.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you should be happy about it, right? And you just kind of hit it on the head, where it feels like, in the case of streaming post LimeWire and things like that, we really need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that of the late stage capitalism, the last three sort of labels bought into the streaming companies. So when they were controlling the streaming, naturally they're giving preferential treatment to their artists and things like that. Whereas and the same thing in comedy. It feels like there was a lot of, it was always about getting a special, right? You wanted to be able to get your special. And now owning your own RSS feed as a podcaster, owning your own TikTok feed, and being able to put out your own content where you're removing that sort of big machine in the middle where it was like, oh, HBO gave me a special, Netflix gave me a special, right? And
now you're like, you can do this on YouTube, Joe Sales.
Exactly. So that's where the empowering and the inspirational part, I'm really excited about, our conversation with her. And so, but before we go, I stumbled across something, and I wanted to throw this into the episode because I think that this is awesome. This is actually something to sort of celebrate. Now, when I was coming up in Florida, and Florida A&M and a lot of the drumline things that would go on, like I was always drawn to a lot of those situations. Well, I saw this the other day. The world is becoming more African, according to the New York Times, right? They declared in a story it's really, really is full of fascinating stats, but it's about Africa's population boom. The African population is projected to double to 2.5 billion over the next 25 years, okay, in contrast with high-income nations where birth rates are declining. And in 1950, Africans made up 8% of the world population. By 2050, they're going to be 25%. So shout out to the continent of Africa showing up, and I'm stoked about that.
Shout out to the Mandingos with the 10 wives. She knew what she was doing. Believe in your dreams.
Yeah, believe in your dreams. But it's great, too, because at least 1/3 of all people 15 to 24 will account for 25% of the population too, which to me that's a cool stat, right? Because I remember when we were little, it's all about China, and it's all about the Indians, and there's 1.8 billion Chinese and 1.2 Indians, and now shout out to Africa.
Listen, I could tell you back in the day that Africa was stepping up, and all you needed to know, all the proof you needed was watching your Netflix timeline. Do you know how many movies out of Nigeria and other countries? And it will be the most complicated storyline, but somehow it goes hard.
Yeah.
Are you serious? Like, they have as many like Real Housewives of whatever. They have the Real Housewives of Uganda or whatever, and they are going just as hard. They're bringing in just as much wealth. They're bringing in just as much technology, and people have been sleeping on Africa for quite some time. And they were like, go on ahead and sleep. Go on ahead and sleep. Go ahead. They had one of the best responses to COVID globally.
That's right.
That anybody had. And they were like, y'all was talking about us. Y'all was out your necks about how we a third world, blue blah blah, and we can't do nothing. But we gonna Wakanda this forever. And they sure did.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because we still undermine the potential of groups based on race. And we still have a color politic globally, whether we'd like to admit it or not.
Yeah. And it is, yes, there's a color politic globally, but I love it. The article went on to say that by 2100, 2 out of 5 people on planet Earth will be African. And I think that's fucking awesome because it just to me, it underlines we're becoming more and more a global community. And it's about time that, the timing maybe matches up.
But it also makes me concerned because it makes me think of these Christian nationalists who are like, sound the alarm. There might not be as many white people. It's a crisis. And they're really acting this way.
What's funny?
So sometimes I'm like...
Yeah, and what's funny is if you heard it the other way, it would be considered racist, right? If you're like, hey, but by X amount, by 2100, there's going to be nothing but 2 out of every 5 people on planet Earth are going to be white people. It might be kind of something nowadays where it's like that would be considered eugenics or whatever. The reason I brought it up to me is a lot more interesting because it almost just seems like the way nature, and the way things should be, right? It's like Africa's a big continent. It's been and it's been getting its minerals and all kinds of things sort of mined for the last 20 years. China's been going through there. We're definitely not free of not being guilty in that situation too as Americans and just raw materials and stuff like that. But from a population perspective, I think it's great because you definitely can drive the economy. You can drive technology, like you said. You can drive all kinds of things, art, pharmaceuticals, and everything. So we're a global.
We've always been a global community.
Yeah.
There has been a shift into not being that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's by design because it's a way to control public nationalism.
Yeah.
To make you believe that we aren't wholly dependent on other countries and other nations is silly.
Yeah.
But it's something that we have as a part of who we are.
Yeah. And, shout out to the internet for bringing us closer. That is something that is a good part about the internet, right? And all right, coming up after the break, our interview with Leanne Linsky. All right, welcome back. Joining us today, we have a really special episode because sort of empowerment from the post-COVID era for us artists, it is something that I am extremely interested in because as musicians, 95% of our income comes from live touring, and overnight, because of COVID, we had to take music and figure out a way to do it online and do it over the internet. And so our guest today, she's a business leader and entrepreneur. She's got a master's of innovation and entrepreneur from UC Irvine.
Wow.
You did time at Upright Citizens Brigade, Second City, IO Chicago, which is cool because my wife's from Northwestern as well. I can't wait to talk about that. But everybody, please welcome. Thank you for coming on the show, Leanne Linsky.
Hi.
Hooty-hoo, hooty-hoo. Yes, thank you for coming on. My first question is, who parties harder, UC Irvine or Northwestern? Or who parties harder? Is it University of Nevada? That's where you get your undergrad, right?
Great question. Even Northwestern in the mix
Exactly.
because I grew up in Illinois, like 45 minutes away from Northwestern. And I did make several trips there for parties, not because I went to school there. So those are pretty impressive. Right? That's when you're in high school.
Yeah.
And then I would say UNLV is definitely
I was gonna say,
Yeah, it's Nevada. You got to rep.
it's Vegas.
It's the guy.
I
Yeah,
mean,
the guy.
Vegas is a pretty good place to be
But-
when you're in your, early 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Girl, I don't know how you did that because I wouldn't have gone to class. Like, I would just been like, "Ooh, shiny." I am not the one.
Now, you as a comedian, please, I'm interested in finding out. I'm sure we have people that we cross over with, but how long were you in Los Angeles?
In LA, I was there probably 9 years.
Wow. Okay. So so you're repping. Where are you at now? Where are you based now?
Now I'm in Seattle. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
But Seattle's really doing big things now.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are unaware that Seattle's really popping.
It is. It's a pretty happening place, which I really need to learn more about because I got here 2 years ago and I barely left my home because I'm twice as old as when I lived in Vegas, but also since COVID, when we first landed here, everything was really still shut down in a way. It was very slow to reopen and kind of get going, but yeah, things are definitely happening here in Seattle.
And the innovation part, the entrepreneur part, the you kind of took things into your own hands. You're the CEO of an online comedy club called Plauzzable. And I noticed you were saying that it wasn't a result of necessarily COVID, but that I'm sure you probably got thrust into having to put this thing together and having to just kind of deal with all the technical issues and everything of having an online club like that. How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So after Vegas, I lived in Vegas for 16 years. I stayed there after college, and that's where I started comedy. And I started with a comedy writing class, and then Second City had a training center there. So then fast forward to I ended up in New York, and I went in full time, like trying to do comedy and acting and the whole thing. And then when I moved to LA, I suddenly found myself spending more time on the 405 than I did on any stage. And I was like, this is bananas. What has happened to my life right now? You know?
This is wrong.
Yeah, so wrong on so many levels. And I would try singing that, but I would break your mic. So there's a reason I'm in comedy and not a musician. Although I did musical improv. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found myself spending so much time in traffic. And this is before COVID, obviously, because I was out and about. And I was doing in-person shows, but, going 2 miles was like an all-day experience. So the other thing is And I missed my colleagues and fellow comedians and from New York. So I was like, how do I connect the two? I'm like, Skype. Maybe I do things on Skype. I remember that. Yeah. And everybody's like, well, maybe. And then I was like, yeah, I'm going to do the Skype thing. And then life happened. I was producing shows in Long Beach, and fast forward to I can't take it anymore. I really have to do something online. And I had been using Zoom for work. And I'm like, I'm going to create a Zoom mic. So I did. And I invited comedians from both East Coast and West Coast. And they're like, what? This is really cool. And then other people would be like, why would I ever do that? And then COVID happened. And then people are like, oh, that's why I would do that. Right.
And that's the thing is that I feel like even before COVID allowed for a perfect storm to happen in which we knew that the tide was turning in some direction, and it kind of had to turn more in favor of the artist because we were making the least but doing the most work. And I think once COVID happened, it made you understand that adaptability is essential.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I want to ask is, how did you convince others to adapt? Because it seems like you were about that life for quite some time. How did you convince others?
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing. What I ended up doing and convincing others, and this is like right before COVID and kind of during COVID, was I would talk to people I knew. Because if I talked to people I knew and already had a relationship with, there was more trust there of like why I would do this.
Okay.
When I started posting about it on social media, then the trolls appeared and were like, what? And that just hurt my heart. I'm like, oh, I'm trying to do something to help you. Why you gotta be so cruel? And then to your point, the other thing I found is, although the existing technologies are fantastic and they really made the pandemic more bearable and connected us, they weren't designed specifically for entertainment. And there were a lot of new problems created. And I was like, whoa, that kind of was really eye-opening. How do I fix some of those problems? And then also, while I'm at it and digging in, is like, there's so many things in the entertainment industry that could be disruptive, because the business model, the way we're constantly paying for stage time, the way we're constantly trying to sustain our living on tips or burgers or a free beer, right? And how do we use that? I mean, yeah, you guys are like, no, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is an opportunity. And so I was like, how do I change this whole thing? How do I get other people who understand where my vision is? And that's what inspired me to go back to school. And I thought I want to build a network of people on the business side of things so that I could really bring my vision to life. So I ended up creating this entire platform, not using existing technologies, but building our own from the ground up on what we needed as entertainers. So there is no audio delay or latency in Plauzzable, because as a comedian, that 1 second,
oh my God,
your time, it throws everything off. It could be
death. Like, same thing in like singing and being in pocket. Like if you're, you feel it even by the slightest amount.
Yeah, it's.
And I don't know if you've ever tried to do a writing session on Zoom, but as a musician, I just remember in the early parts of the pandemic, wow, that was frustrating.
Yeah.
You like all of y'all would be off just a half a measure.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is so bad. Yeah. When the pandemic hit for us as a band, one of the things we were trying to figure it out, and one of the first clubs that we actually played at was a club called Harvell's. Shout out to Seven and everybody at Harvell's. But what they did is they instantly kind of put together like a live stream situation, and we would go with masks and everything, and everybody that was there was had masks and everything. But it was the first time that we played, and you'd play a concert, right, and then you come down. And you're done, and it's just dead silent.
Yeah.
And that sort of interactive reaction, I think that's what I think a lot of the listeners and everything actually, it served its purpose kind of in the very beginning. But how does that work for you, especially in comedy? If you're doing remote stuff, are you? How does that work? You can in laughter. You bringing laugh tracks in. You doing any of that kind of stuff?
Well, because of the audio setup on ours, so on some of the things that we're familiar with, and I'll use as an example, like Zoom or Google Meets or something. If I'm talking and then you cough or you talk or make noise, all of a sudden your frame lights up and cuts my audio off. It's like one directional, right? So with Plauzzable, everybody can talk at the same time as though we're in the room and no one gets cut off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we have that. And that's like the first thing a lot of the comics notice when they log in is like, wait a minute, I don't have to wait. Like we're all talking at the same time. And the only thing that really creates the latency is if someone has bad Wi-Fi signal, maybe.
Yeah.
Which, I can't control that, but we can definitely make it better in the sense that we can hear each other in real time without that that just exhausting pause. But the other thing that I found in Zoom, and especially because I was back in school during COVID and it went from in-person to online, and I found myself in gallery mode even when the professor was speaking because it was so fascinating to see what my fellow students were doing, and most of them should really put their clothes back on. But yeah, there were some of those moments. But what I found fascinating is with the way things were set up, I could, as a viewer, go from gallery mode, which I would always be in because that just, it seemed like it would bring people together more, right? And then if I were speaking, I'd want to see the response because not everybody has their audio on. Well, as a performer, when we look out in the audience, we're usually blinded partially by the lights from the stage, but we can see a few people. We can get that interaction and just enough nonverbal response to understand where we're at in our performance. And that's all we need
Sure.
with Plauzzable, right? Well, with Plauzzable, we designed the screen layout so that the performer is always dominant and anchored on like the left side of the screen. And then all of
Oh,
the
cool.
audience members are on the right and they pile in, but you don't see them all at once. You don't go into gallery view and then minimize your performer because that's the whole reason you're there. But you want to enjoy it with other people. So you can see up to like 6 at a time, but you can scroll through, they carousel through while the performer stays stagnant. So you never lose real focus of what you're doing. And
Oh.
and even if I'm the performer, I can do a quick scroll and I can read my audience fairly quickly without having to lose myself or multitask.
So how much do you have in the way of people that, because I love the fact we live here in Los Angeles and Hollywood. If we get a hair up our ass at the last moment, we can go down to the store. You can go to a Comedy Cellar. You can see people running reps at any time. It's the same thing with New York and everything like that. But what I love about the idea of Plauzzable and what you've created is if somebody as a fan wants to casually look for new comics in a way to where you can just be like, hey, it's a Thursday night rather than watching, an episode of whatever I've seen a million times, 90 Day Fiance. Although shout out to 90 Day Fiance, it is pretty legit.
Or the Golden
What's that?
or the Golden Bachelor.
The Golden Bachelor is pretty solid as well.
I've seen none of this. I am
We'll talk.
culturally ignorant.
No, we'll talk offline.
apologize.
But how much do you have in the way of like people that are like casually going through and then like, hey, I want to dip in and from a fan perspective?
Yeah. So I love this because that's you nailed it. That's exactly what this was designed for, is so that fans can come in and they can look through a whole talent directory. So if you think of like, when you log into Netflix or something, what if you had like all the actors and people on there and then you're like, oh, what is this person in? And you see all their movies or whatever. Well, on Plauzzable, you can look through the talent. Or you can go to the all shows listing, and because everything's in real time live, so it's kind of like appointment TV or like the TV guide.
Oh, cool.
You have to be at a certain time, And some people were like, Leanne, why would I be at a certain time? I go, if you were to go to a club, you just don't show up whenever you want and expect a performance. You go at a real time.
Yeah.
So that's how it's set up. So you can also peruse it that way. And you're absolutely right. Fans log in, they create a free account, and once they log in, they can peruse all shows, see what fits their schedule. They can, see the job description, the show description. They can look at the comics that are in it and read more about them. All the things are all right there. Whereas if you go on to other streaming services, where people are independently creating, it's just the service to stream it, not a directory or not a show guide or nothing like that. And so we wanted to incorporate all of that and also give the comedians an opportunity to make money, so they can determine if it's a free show or mic, or if they want to charge a ticket price, they could do that. And then they.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So
that's how you've monetized it for participants.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
So they have free access right now to everything. We're in beta testing out a lot of these features. So everybody has free access to anything. And if a performer wants to charge for it, they can set their ticket price and they get the majority of that ticket price as their revenue. And then of course we take some, as that's how we monetize it and cover the cost. Yeah.
And so you have basically a virtual audience. And so if a guy or a girl wants to run some reps, they could just kind of join Plauzzable as a comedian and be like, you know what, I'm going to go up, today. I want to, work on this or whatever. That's really great. We don't have that necessarily.
No, not at all.
As musicians. We don't
have. There's no place I can try my not so tight 5.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You know what?
No, exactly.
I'd love to get your feedback as a musician, what your experience would be.
Yeah, no, we're definitely, it's something I'm looking forward to sort of casually trying out as a fan as well. Because I know when I learned about you and Plauzzable, I was like thinking about it much from the CEO kind of, badass female perspective, which I do want to get into, but as a fan, I can't wait to sort of check it out as well. Speaking of that, the female empowerment side of things, I know I'm a big fan of, the boss kind of female comedians right now in a way that I feel like I'm used to hearing about how bad the misogyny might have been, like back in the day, but it seems like there's a moment where there's this empowerment that's coming along, whether it's Whitney Cummings, whether it's Sarah Silverman, where it almost, where it's grown into from a producer's standpoint, kind of controlling that side of the table. How did you find, as being a female entrepreneur in a predominantly kind of poorly managed male, sector like comedy, stand-up comedy especially?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when I started comedy, I was actually working for a home builder, a national home builder, and I worked for this company for 13 years. We built homes, and for several years of that time while I was there, I was doing construction. I was a back-end superintendent. Talk about male-dominated industry, right?
Oh my God.
I was the only girl in the field. It was a blast. I had a blast. I can't lie.
I was going to say, you probably, you got a lot of attention, I'm sure.
Yeah, I did.
No, but they were probably like, she run this.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And they were, and the guys in the field, they were some of my dearest friends. Like, we became really close. They were really good to me. We were super competitive. I cannot tell why. Like, we were very competitive, but a healthy competitive. It was really good. And I enjoyed it. That was like, I just happened to be at the right place in the right time in that particular industry. So when I moved to comedy, it didn't seem to faze me that it was super male dominated. It's like, well, if I could survive the construction industry building, I could take this on. And
Sure.
I'm like, watch me, this is what you do. And I ended up, I ran an open mic in New York for 7.5 years and produced shows and did all the things. And so when I went to LA, I did the same thing. And I don't know if it's because I had two older brothers who inspired me, because they left home right away and they joined the military. They went off and they did things, and they traveled the world. And I thought that was so cool. And I think a lot of the time when I took things on, I wanted them to be impressed with me, think like, oh, my sister, she's cool. She's a badass. Like, and I'm like, yeah,
something to prove.
Yeah. I kind of,
Yeah.
I want them to think I'm cool and I'm doing things and that I'm not a sissy, and I was their cool sister. And so I think I kind of had somewhere in the back of my mind a lot of the time of like, yeah, I can do this. And also my parents also were really good about, the road ahead does not lead back home. That's what they said.
Yeah.
When they
Yeah.
got me at school. Like,
Which for a lot of comedians and musicians, sadly, it does.
That is hilarious. They were like, look forward, my child.
Yeah,
because
you can go
you're only
anywhere.
coming
But
here
you
for
can't come here.
Thanksgiving
yeah.
and holidays. Boo boo.
Yes.
I think that had that because I was raised where my parents were like, we're raising you to be independent and to take care of yourself, because, when you're 18, that's your job. Like, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And they were really good about that. And at the time, I probably didn't appreciate, I'm pretty sure I didn't appreciate them as much as I do now, looking back. But I think that had a lot to do with it. And then, I also, there's something instinctively in me of like, you tell me that something's hard, that just irritates me. It's like, it's okay if it's hard. I'm okay with something being hard. If it's not hard, why would I waste my time? Almost is kind of my mentality on it. It's like,
Well, but I almost feel like that became part of this culture.
Yeah.
In the last 20 years, we were like, it's hard. I don't want to.
Yeah.
And I will say that I also don't find it that surprising that it's a little easier for women to move in comedy, because if you look at the top specials right now on Netflix, it's half women, half men. That wasn't even true a decade ago.
No, exactly.
But there have been so many strides and so many female-led projects that were written by women,
Yep.
which I think is so huge to mention, because there's been this mythology that women aren't funny. And I was like, no, it was what you wrote for women wasn't funny to say.
Hey, right.
So that's a huge difference. And now that you're seeing women-led productions, women-directed films, women-led comedy tours, you're seeing what women actually have to say. And surprise, it's funny.
Fucking awesome. Yeah, exactly.
And I love that you're pointing that out. It has shifted for sure. And I think a lot of it, I see it on Plauzzable. The majority of comedians producing on Plauzzable are women.
Because they were like, oh, I don't have to deal with no bullshit or no dude who's making suggestions about what might be funny for me.
Right. Yep. And I got straight.
Oh my gosh, how novel.
Yeah.
I got straight access to my kerns. I ain't got to put nobody in between me and my kerns.
Get the fuck out of here with this bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, it just irritates the piss out of me. And it's so interesting that men will simultaneously say what they don't think is funny while trying to put what they think should be funny on a woman without listening to what that woman actually has to offer.
Yeah.
It's just an but I feel like that's been happening for every marginalized group.
Yeah.
Any marginalized group was always going to have to fight to be like, no, but here's what we actually say.
Yeah.
I know this is what you heard one person say that one time in this one restaurant, but here's how we actually talk. And also, surprise, we are not a monolith. So some of us talk like this.
Right.
Some of us talk like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And others talk like this. Oh my God.
It's so true. And you know what I think also helped in the shift is technology, because it kind of leveled the playing field on who and made it accessible for people to share their voice. Things like YouTube, social media. Before, like where, there were gatekeepers to everything.
Yes.
And now that
and Taylor Tomlinson with TikTok, like for example, Matt.
Yeah, I just feel like all these girls were like Elle Woodsing it and being like, what? Like, this is hard? Okay, bye.
Yeah.
And I was here for it because I think that there's a new generation of women that are never going to grow up with the stigma of a man told me I couldn't do it.
Hey.
And that is the first time you're ever going to see that. Like, I think that that's the first time that's happened historically that will ever be on record. But I see that the blowback of that is so vast. I think that that's why you're getting all these abortion debates and just things trying to take you back to the 50s.
Yeah.
Because this really is the first time where women are at the helm of what's being produced, what's being said on both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
The conservative party is most emboldened by women, whether or not you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Look at it.
There's an empowerment. Yeah.
This is the first time in history we could ever say that's so.
Yep.
In written history, anyway.
Yeah.
And that's something.
Yeah. I think you hit it. You're actually hitting on something that's really, really big. I think when you flatten the playing field, when somebody has the ability to sort of corral their own community, their own audience that will support them, that is power, that is leverage. And in that respect, if you own your own, YouTube channel, you own your own TikTok channel, and you're putting great stuff out there, it's you can't deny that. And from there, I think comes power, and that's what's inspiring to me. And it's inspiring about what you did, Leanne, in that you just take it in and think creatively, entrepreneurially, and also from an empowerment perspective. That's the part I love is giving people the ability to sort of take their own future into their own hands, rather than, I know for us and musicians, we joke about this all the time. There's 80, 100,000 songs that goes up to Spotify every day. That's like scratching a lotto ticket, right? But if you can control something, you put something out there and you kind of work at it to control your own content and your own channel, that definitely, that's where the empowerment comes from. I love it.
What has been the humor that you're seeing, like how, especially given like this post-COVID?
That's a great question.
Post-January 6th.
Yeah.
What comedy is like? Where we need to go.
One of the things I always learned in improv, and I love this, that one of my improv instructors always shared, was play to the top of your intelligence. Play to the top of your intelligence. Assume your audience is smart. Right? Because a lot of times when people go into stuff, we tend to, a lot of times in comedy, like new people might dumb things down or go for low hanging fruit. But I think
Digging fart jokes. That's where the money's at. That's what my mom always told me.
exactly. Right? And it's like, what if you play to the top of your intelligence and really educate yourself? Like, I find that some of the best comedians are really, they're so well read and they're so educated.
Yes.
Yeah.
So whether
Yeah.
through school or other means, but they really take the time to be aware and to pay attention. They're typically good observers of life and take things in. And I think that's so valid. So to kind of get into your question of like, what am I seeing? I do see a shift. I see people are more self-aware, right? Where they're more aware of what am I saying? What repercussions could it have? You know, kind of thinking before we speak. And when at mics and stuff, I see a growing trend in feedback mics where peer-to-peer feedback is shared among comedians. Like, hey, I really appreciated that joke you said, but you may want to be cautious because this could be misinterpreted into this. But if you switch your words around, it will come across clearer. Or so there's a lot of conversation about how to approach topics so that we can still be relatable and find humor in them without punching down. So there's a lot more punching up versus punching down or laughing with instead of laughing at. And I think a lot of people are taking more of those things into consideration, no matter what, because the truth is that in a world as big as it is with billions and trillions of people in it, we're pretty hard pressed to find someone exactly who walks and talks and thinks like me, right? There's one of me. And
also, that sounds boring as hell.
right. It's very
Yeah.
boring. Yeah. And it's kind of like even in, did you ever see that movie Multiplicity? And the guy copies himself like multiple times.
And then he starts getting the stupid ones.
I like pizza, Steve. Yeah, it's that guy. Like he can barely talk, right? It's so messed up. It's
or like on Family Guy when Stewie does it and he's like, did I do good, Stewie? Did I not eat the poos, Stewie?
Yeah, it's like they just
did I not eat the
more and more morphed out of like reality. And it's so funny, but it's like everybody can't tell jokes the way I do, and God, I'm so glad you don't, and vice versa. But what I love about having, I'll use Plauzzable as an example, like we had a mic where someone from Sri Lanka, someone from Ireland, someone from the UK, someone from, Virginia, someone from, California are all together. And we all have completely different life experiences. We all grew up, completely different views of the world are different, but we can laugh about the same relatable things for an entire hour and enjoy one another. And it's like, I think comedy is, though we talk about provocative topics and stuff, there's so many opportunities where we can come together because it's relatable. And I think part of comedy's job is attention and release. We laugh at things that probably we shouldn't laugh at because if you look at the science of why people laugh, sometimes it's out of fear, sometimes it's out of discomfort, awkward moments, right? When someone
let the air out of the energy.
Yeah, it can de-escalate something. And so although something could be really dicey, it cracks us open to a bit of like, okay, that was awkward and uncomfortable. Are you uncomfortable? Okay, it's okay to laugh at and sometimes and let this out. And I think that's part of comedy. And I think some of good comedians, like people always say, who's your favorite comedian? And I find that hard to answer because I like so many different comics and for different reasons because,
that's a mean question. Because I know that when people ask me what's my favorite song or who my favorite artist is, I'm like, well, what day is it?
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? Like, I think that that's rude. Yeah. And I think it's easier for most people in a creative sense anyway to say, here are the people I'm feeling right now. And here are the people I will feel till the day is long. To the dawn of time. Like, I mean, Richard Pryor's always going to be Richard Pryor and he's going to be funny. I don't need you to tell me that. No. Do you know what I'm saying?
Or Chappelle, even,
I don't need that.
Yeah.
But it's cool to hear I like going to comedy stores or even, especially in the pandemic, it was great to go on things like Twitch or, Plauzzable, and see new things that you would see because I have been exposed to comedians that I wouldn't have known about that have these wonderful perspectives on the world. And to me, the best comedians can take a highly nuanced idea and simplify it to a massive audience. Like, to me, that's my favorite. Recently, I went to the Comedy Store, and I forget the comedian's name, but she was hilarious. And she said, okay, the House Republicans, they were looking for their new speaker or whatever, and they were unable to do so, obviously. And she said, you know what this reminds me of? She was like, I'm from Texas, and this reminds me of a weave store that doesn't know it's a weave store. Like, it's got weaves and donuts and alcohol and guns, but mostly what it has is weaves.
Yeah.
And it just should call itself Weaves and Things.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. It's called itself Jay's. And you don't know what the hell they sell at Jay's or what they do, but really Jay's is Weaves and Things. And it should just be called Weaves and Things. And I was like, that's really brilliant.
Yeah. Like, they should change the GOP to just Christian nationalists, right? Just go ahead. That's what you're selling.
That's what y'all doing.
That's what y'all doing. That's what you want. You voted in a block. So, yeah.
Let's just call a spade a spade. Like, y'all just should call yourself Christian nationalists
Christian
and
nationalists.
things.
That's right. Just
and
to
things.
do it. And things.
And just put in things.
And things.
For when...
Like,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, just
Christian nationalism and others. Yeah. Thanks. The sign out front of the Capitol. We're off topic, but I definitely appreciate your time. I feel like we could talk to you all night. I feel like comedy, we're going to need it more than ever.
It's such a unifier, and I always think that comedy is the new CNN. So for our listeners, what's the best way to find you? How can we get people to your show and to support you?
Oh, thank you so much. The best way is plauzzable.com, and that's Plauzzable. Plauzzable, like
yay,
like ZZ Top,
like applause, like applause.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Leanne, for your time, and we're going to keep checking in with you periodically because I want to see how it's going, and keep us on top of how things are from your end.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And you two are really funny. Maybe you should come to an open mic.
Okay, yay.
Hey, we'll do it.
Christian nationals
and things. Thanks, Leanne. All right. Before we go, we can't leave the people without giving them the segment that they're asking for. Tour stories. So, seeing as how you're fresh back, I'm going to let you give me one this week. What's your best tour story this week?
Well, okay. So, one of the things that happens when you tour with a kind of legend act, that's what I call them.
Yeah.
Like someone who's not new, or someone who's not like, super, super popular for today, but they're popular like forever. Like they're always going to be popular in some kind of way.
Yeah.
Is that they always have a set of super fans, right? And they ride the line of stalker, but they're not stalker-esque. But I mean, they're like super fans with like, if they wasn't on the right cocktail of things, it could go awry. But for the most part, they're just super fans,
Good
right?
intentions.
And they are super fans with the best intentions. So management or security or whatever, acknowledges that these people are going to be at every city and they're going to hang out weirdly, but not weirdly in a like, we're going to John Lennon you type of way. Just, we're going to make you feel slightly uncomfortable.
Sure.
So,
and they give them a wide berth, right? Like you can hang out.
So me and the other backup singer are relatively new to the outfit. And shout out to Kitten. Hey girl, hey.
Hey girl.
But there's sometimes where they just, because they've told the band the same information for hundreds of years, they haven't noticed to tell them like, no, that's Ashley Larry out there. He's fine. He's harmless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for a couple of shows and a couple of we're sitting out there were these three dudes that looked like they had just gotten off the Staten Island ferry. And I was just like, okay, what? And I thought that for whatever reason, I didn't clock that I had seen these same three dudes in three other locations, but they were at this one hotel in front of this newsstand. And they were there every day. And they would just literally stand with their arms folded like they were, on the lower enforcement team from The Sopranos. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I just thought they owned this. And they were just very protective of their newsstand. And so I accidentally went up to them one day being like, hi, can I get a cup of coffee and some Skittles? And they were like, the newsstand's closed. And I was like, well, why are you here? And they were like, we're waiting for Billy. And I was like, oh, my bad. And my whole face, if you could have seen my whole face just look cracked, being like, Okay. And so then the security had to say, no. There's like these guys, and they're very harmless, but they do come, whatever. And it was one of those things where I forgot that that's a real possibility.
Sure.
So it just kind of made me laugh that, these super fans are almost another part of security because their super fandom keeps the talent safe from the real crazy people. But if you don't know,
security.
they're like, a secondary wave, if you will. But if you don't know them, you're like, hi, what do you do?
Yeah.
Okay, nothing. Okay, bye. And then you have to be careful not to engage them too much because then they'll like want to tell you their entire life story.
No, you'll be there for an hour.
And somehow want to get backstage and you're like, I just got this job 2 days ago, sweetie.
Yeah.
I am not your in, okay?
I don't know how to get at Billy's cell phone.
I don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
I don't rebel yell that. I mean, I rebel yell on the stage and then I go home.
Yeah.
Oh, no. But the one cool thing I will say is, so Billy Idol shot a movie of a concert that he made just for his like most VIP fans, and they shot it in the middle of Hoover Dam. And that's the first time that's ever happened.
How'd they not get the water on all the instruments and stuff like that?
We were like on the outside part.
Oh, okay.
So we weren't like
Okay.
in the water. But we're in like the basin part, like right.
Oh, snap. Yeah.
It's crazy. So you can see that film if you want to. So it's called Billy Idol State Line.
Hey.
And it's that one line that divides, so you can see like all the right.
Oh,
so it's
wow.
right there.
Dope.
But I think that it was really cool because he also talks about the conservation effort and how the Hoover Dam helped that in that area and the challenges that it's facing. So to be a part of that film was really cool. So we got to see the first screening of it and it looks awesome. It's so beautifully shot. But it was cool that Billy Idol himself came out, thanked us all for being a part of the film. But I did feel like being a part of living history because you're at something that's never happened before.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So,
Congrats.
shout out to Billy Idol and his whole team. That was, and if you want to see the movie, I'll definitely put the stuff
link?
I'll put the links in the show.
And it's called one more time. It's called
Billy Idol State Line, and it comes out November 15th.
Hey, I love it. I love it. All right. Well, that's it. We're going to leave you with that for this week. What a great interview, and I'm glad to have you back. It's good to see your face.
It's great to see you as well.
Yeah, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Slap the Power is written and produced by Rick Barrio-Dill and Maya Sykes. Associate producer, Bree Corey. Audio and visual engineering and studio facilities provided by Slap Studios LA with distribution through our collective home for social progress in art, Slap the Network. If you have any ideas for a show you want to hear or see, or if you would like to be a guest artist on our show, please email us at info@slapthepower.com.
Yo!